you come my way? Tell me why you act.
All right. Welcome everyone. Welcome, Roses. Welcome, Roses family. We got some gifts on the call tonight. So it's so good to see either your faces or your names. Know all of y'all love y'all like cake. Um, Definitely welcome to tonight's discussion, produced by the ever so talented Carlos and Kristen, bringing y'all that heat, bringing y'all that fire. So we're very much looking forward to this conversation about trans awareness and the trans community in the media space. So we definitely want y'all to do what we always do during this time, to listen, learn, and leverage. So definitely, listen to what our wonderful guests have to say, and all the knowledge and jewels they're going to drop for us. We got returning Noah. Noah's going to bless us with jewels, and Noah's hosting this. So if y'all remember Noah from a couple events earlier this year, Noah's back. I always love listening to Noah talk because they always just always leave the session better than I was when I started. So it's always good to have Noah with us. So Noah, welcome back to the Roses for sure. And definitely welcome Connie and Dominique. Thank you so much for making the time out of your busy schedules to be with this incredible group of people that we call the 100 Roses from Concrete all over the country. So we're East Coast, West Coast, Midwest, international. We're all over the place. So definitely thank you for us taking a little bit of time out of your day to definitely bless us with your presence and your knowledge. Because the topics that you all are gonna discuss tonight are very important for our community that doesn't know a lot about the trans community. So this is our space to really like learn more about the trans community, especially in the creative services industry, which I would say 100% of our members work in. So I welcome you, and I thank you all in the same sentence. And thank you once again for spending a little bit of time with us today. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to spotlight all of y'all and get my mug off of this screen, if I can figure out how to do that. Okay, so yeah, I'm gonna start with that, and then let me find. So that was Connie. So let me find and spotlight. Then let me find Noah, and then Noah, you can kick it off in a couple seconds. I just gotta find you. Where are you under? Oh, okay, there you go. All right, Noah, the stage is all yours.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here and to be a part of this conversation that is personally so important to me. I'm Noah. I use they, them pronouns, and I work in tech. I'm also an artist and an activist, and I'm so excited to be facilitating this conversation with Dominique and Connie. Before we get started, though, I did want to take a moment to have a moment of silence for the people who we've lost this year who are trans. If you're unaware, this has been one of the most deadly years for trans people, specifically trans women of color. So I just want to take a moment where we just have a brief moment of silence to honor those who we've lost. Okay, thank you all so much for joining in me with that. Well, we have two awesome people here today that we're going to learn a ton from. I'm so excited to introduce them. I'm going to start with Connie Fleming. So Connie's career encompasses so many roles. She is a lifelong resident of New York City and has been an acclaimed model for several years, sought by designers such as Vivienne Westwood, Andre Walker, and she also recently graced the cover of Candy. Today, Connie splits her time between various artistic endeavors. So when you get off of here, please go and check out the incredible work that Connie is doing. And I think you can see her URL right there in her screen. So Awesome.
Oh
Today
no,
we
these
also
aren't
have
other artists'
Dom.
works. Sorry, these are other artists' works, both friends.
Oh, awesome, awesome, awesome. And then today we also have Dominique Silver. Dominique is an actor, model, activist, and of course, a proud trans woman. Dominique was born in San Diego, but has finally settled in New York City with Connie. So we've got some East Coast love over here. Dominique has worked with fashion names such as Pierre Moss, Richardson Magazine, Glenn Letchford, and a host of other folks. Dominique is also an outspoken activist who has been heavily involved in the BLM movement, Planned Parenthood, and has been has been featured on platforms like MTV News, where she gave her perspective on the Black trans experience. If you all can join me in welcoming Connie and Dominique, that would be great. We're so excited to have them, and I'm so excited to jump off the conversation today. So I'm just gonna buckle down, and we're gonna get it started, and just hop right into the conversation. So as you all know, today's conversation is called Keep It Real, Creating Space for Trans Experience in the Media. And there is unfortunately a huge trope that happens within trans folks' representation in the media. Since 2002, GLAAD has documented 102 episodes and non-recurring storylines of scripted TV that contain transgender characters. Among those, 40% of the transgender characters were cast as a victim. The most common profession transgender characters were depicted as having was that of a sex worker, which is a fifth of all characters depicted. That's 20%. Anti-transgender slurs, language, and dialogue was present in at least 61% of the catalog episodes and storylines that were found. And the statistic shows that the share of consumers who would watch a television show if the lead cast member is transgender in the United States is 40. The statistic shows that the share of consumers who will watch a television show if the lead cast member is transgender in August of 2017 was less than 43%. So there is a lot of work to be done. And I just want to start with you, Dominique. I'd love to hear your take on what this means to you, what this representation of trans people in the media looks like, and how it's overwhelmingly negative, and how you view that.
I just think as a trans woman, to typically always be cast as like a sex worker or like a person that the guy is cheating on the wife with. And I think it's always like a derogatory character, which I think, we never, I know we're going to talk about it later, but we never celebrate like trans love and, men that love trans openly and that are willing to be honest and introduce to their families and, to their friends and integrate into their life. So we're lacking that representation in the media because it's always derogatory. And, I think that we need to, I guess, maybe not fall into the stereotypes or fall into the machine of entertainment to always put us in that roles instead of fight for other roles and maybe even non-trans roles. That's what I believe in. I think a lot of trans people should play non-trans roles as well, because not only, we are trans people at the end of the day, but at the end of the day, we are also people. And we've been a lot of us have played a role for most of our life, denying, who we really were until we got to a point where we can accept ourselves and be who we really are. So that's acting alone, to get by in society. So I think we should have more opportunities as trans people to represent other entities and positive aspects in entertainment. I would love to see more of that, and I would love to be a part of that. Because like I said, I've done a lot of stuff, and yeah, I'm always cast as a prostitute or a girl that went missing or a drug addict, and it's never anything like, oh, she went to no, she went to It's like, oh no, she went to college and she has a degree and she's married. No, it's always like, oh no, she was the mistress of the rich guy and he was taking care of, no positive story. So yeah, I concur with that. I think that's a bad misrepresentation of trans women in media, and that is an issue that needs to be addressed immediately if possible.
Yeah, I totally agree that there's been misrepresentation of trans people in general, but trans women, incredibly so, are oftentimes the people who are painted as victims. Connie, I'd love to hear your piece on this. And also, I'd love to hear just the richness of experience that you all have witnessed in community with other trans folks to kind of give light to the scope of roles that people have in real life that could be represented on the screen.
Well, I think it's more a symptom of the larger society and how the larger society wants to hold trans people in the villain and victim sphere. It's easy. It's easier to indoctrinate your children into hatred and into fear by having it reflected to you by like, you know, by always having the sort of role that it was in Dress to Kill and in Silence of the Lambs. It's something that is mentally ill, violent, lying, which is most important, that we are lying and our lives are lies, and that we are at the basis dishonest. So that sort of trope, you could say, has to be reinforced. And now in this moment with the BLM movement and Black Trans Lives Matters movement, I think now it's sort of opening up and widening, and hopefully it comes to the moment where if you want to put that kind of character out there, it will reflect upon you and your prejudice and your sort of, and then the question will be asked of producers, writers, directors, why are you sort of going back on this kind of character formation? And as for me, I've known entertainers, mathematicians, doctors, designers, the whole gambit. We are part of life. We are not separate from life. It goes through from birth to death, that our lives are valuable and needed in society to push society forward. So to kind of want and need that villain character, it has to be reflected upon society of why you need that.
Yeah, I 100% agree that it's most definitely a representation of society to let trans people be the scapegoat for their own shortcomings, and that's completely unfair. And as you spoke to, Connie, there's just such a richness and a diversity of experience within the trans community. We are more than just objects of affection, and oftentimes that is what is represented in the media, on television shows, even in people who rise to acclaim, right? It's always being positioned as someone for the public gaze, for the male gaze, and that just won't do anymore. And Connie, I love that you pointed out that now it's becoming a reflection, right? It can't just be something that's just swept under the rug. We're just going to throw this trans character in the show and see how people deal with it. Now there's some repercussions for the actions that people have, and I think that's what day needs to happen right now. It can no longer be a situation of people just writing characters without experience. And that kind of brings me to another point, Dominique. You really highlighted this when you were talking earlier, which is that people who aren't trans play trans characters all the time. We see it all the time where they have no background of experience for what it's like to be trans. They don a hat and they're like doing some weird character dance of what it means to be trans. And Dominique, I most definitely agree with you that it almost underscores the negativity of the world, when trans women or trans men or non-binary folks can't just play people because we're people. So I'd love to hear both of your thoughts, but I'll start with you, Dominique.
Yeah, it goes to what I'm saying. Like, I feel like, yeah, as trans people, we should be able to audition for main roles in regular productions that's a female role. Like, I don't think we should necessarily always be cast as a trans person. Like, that to us, that's not even acting, that's who we are. And I feel like that's not even exercising a talent, having a trans person to play a trans person. Like, I want a challenge. If I'm going for a role, I want to be able to play like a lesbian from the 14th century. You know, that's a challenge to me, and not a transgender prostitute or a drug addict. Like, that's something that life has already dealt us the cards, which is sometimes, you know, what we had to do as a survival mechanism. And maybe sometimes we don't want to keep reliving that trauma that we had to do to survive and make a living. So I feel like, yeah, we need to have more seats at the table to do things that are cisgender have all access to, which I don't understand. You know, I understand like being trans and wanting to feel special and wanting to have like, you know, your own lane, but also then that also limits you from, you know, you can't play other parts, and people will always typecast you as a trans, you know, person, which, you know, you have more variety than that. You know, some of us trans people are non-binary, and they are very fluid in their sexuality and their gender. So they can play a multitude of different roles with no concern about their sexuality or what people are gonna think. So I think we have to evolve as trans talent as well, and fight for more equal representation in the industry and more seats at the table with our allies, and have our allies take a seat back sometimes, which they will have to, and a lot of people don't like to, but sometimes that's what needs to be done. People have to take a step back and let other people come to the front that haven't had the time or the representation or the spotlight on them to shine, because other people are overcrowding the spaces.
Connie, do you have anything to add?
Well, historically in acting and in entertainment, when you play a trans role, you are lauded for it. I mean, think about who has played trans characters. They've won Academy Awards. They have gone on to bigger and better because they have stretched so wide and sort of given so much of themselves in a way. So if that shoe can be on that foot, the shoe can be on our foot and play a mother of 5 in Long Island. Why? Will we be lauded for making such a stretch to be a human being, a normal quote unquote human being? You know, that's sort of what Dominique was saying about having a seat at the table and someone saying, you know, no, you can't put a flower in the gun and sell Coke when people are protesting outside. You know, so someone needs to be in the room. Comb that Black child's hair, please, before you take the photograph. A little grease, maybe, for Christ's sake. So, you know, we have to widen the scope and allow those who aren't us or like us to come in, sit down, and share their experience. Experience is what is going to save humanity, in my opinion. If we all kind of can come together and share our experiences and take from each other, we can hopefully move on without going up in a ball of fire.
Yeah, those are such good points. I 100% agree with all of that. And I think it's a good jumping point to talk about something else, which just who is represented when representation happens, right? And that can span the gamut of a few things, but I would say personally from my experience, whenever I'm seeing people who are represented, they're often white, right? They often had some type of exposure before they came out, which allowed them to appropriately or not appropriately just seamlessly transition over to new roles or new opportunities before. So they had some type of privilege that allowed them to get to where they are. So I just love to hear y'all's thoughts on like who, when we're talking about a seat at the table, who gets the first seat, you know, who gets the first seat and who's able to, who is represented now in the media, and what your thoughts are on those.
Well, from the beginning at Madame Arthur's in Paris, it was Coccinelle, Bambi, April Ashley, blonde, blue-eyed, white French women, you know, a wasp. They were easier to sort of fantasize about. They could be fetishized, but not fetishized to the point where you could throw them away. It would be harder to dispatch them into oblivion as white, quote unquote, women, whereas women of color are easily dispatched. You could disappear tomorrow and be like, oh, her, really? She's gone? I need to go to Chick-fil-A. I'll talk to you tomorrow. It's easy. So now with Pose and with sort of Pose has opened up the door, and Laverne has opened up the door, and now there are avenues for the Black experience to be shown in all of its sort of colors and facets. But until we tackle the race question, we cannot then tackle the trans question, because race is here. Then there's gay, non-binary, blah, blah, blah. We are all the way at the back of the line. So we have to push, and we have to kind of be annoying about it and want and demand certain things and use our platforms in order to have checks and balances in a way.
Yeah, I love that you were able to speak to that, and you brought up who pretty much everyone, when you think about trans folks these days, Laverne and what she's been able to do for Black trans women, Latinx trans women, Indigenous trans women, and really starting to take off the stigma and showing what trans life can look like, which is vibrant and beautiful and whole, right? And Laverne has really been able to do that. And of course, I would be remiss to not mention MJ Rodriguez's Emmy nomination, which was I mean, I don't know if I thought something like that would happen so soon, but just to see her applauded for her work. And of course it was on Pose, which is a show that centers trans women, but she was being celebrated for her artistry. And that came with the fact that she was a trans woman. And I largely think it wasn't because she was trans, it's because she acted her butt off in every single one of those episodes. And so we are starting to get to a point where people can be seen. But like you said, Connie, racism is 100% a big factor in why we don't see more trans women of color on the screen. Dominique, do you have anything that you'd like to add or share?
Yeah, it's also a lot of favoritism that I see, and they only select like a few number of trans women to romanticize or publicize or give the most publicity, which I think to me is unfair because also those trans women are not really doing their part to share the spotlight in the community as well, which I don't agree with. You know, there were a lot of trans women like Connie and myself that were around before they was even had the possibilities to be where they're at now. So I just don't like how they like to forget, you know, where they were, who set the foundation for them. And I also feel like there's also like a colorism thing as well. You know, they like to romanticize. Hey, are you okay? They like to romanticize the light-skinned trans woman and the young, you know, pretty. Hey. They like to romanticize the young and pretty trans women that are already famous, you know, as well, that all come from a wealthy family. So I think that, yeah, I don't think that it's fair and the representation is not good at all. And I think that it needs to be a work inside of the community to open up the doors to also shed light on other members in the community. I feel like on every red carpet event, you know, a girl should take another girl with them to share the spotlight, to show them that they are a part of the community and they wanna make sure they wanna be a good representation and open more doors. And like I said, get more seats at the table, not be the only one to sit at the table and eating. There's a lot of seats for everyone else, and there's so much food to go around. I don't like when people just sit at the table by themselves and they are comfortable with that. That doesn't sit well with me.
Closing the door behind you.
Yeah,
Right.
I think that's a great point. Yeah, I think often when we think about the seat at the table, we don't think about who else is at the table, or we're trying to be. I know something that I talk a lot about with my trans and queer friends is, do we even want to be the first? Like, why are we trying to be the first trans
Okay, baby.
basketball player or the first, like that the time for that is come and gone. We need more than just one person who can
Yes.
come along and really change things. We need multiple trans folks of all genders, of all races, everywhere, to kind of let people know that there is a diversity of experience and it's not just one type of person, not the light-skinned Black trans woman, as Dominique was pointing out, that gets a seat at the table. And I even wanted to talk about like just
Okay, Mama.
the people who we don't even see. I mean, I don't know that I've ever seen a Black trans man on the television screen. I've never seen a role. I don't know if they're casting for those. Like, you don't even get to see that type of person. And it goes to the same fact of like, why are we doing that? And a lot of times it's because it infringes on other people's masculinity, right? You don't want to see a man who looks like you and talks like you and dresses like you, who like might disrupt some type of inner viewpoint that you have of yourself. So we are even not beginning to scratch the surface on who can be in the media and what that looks like. I mean, trans models who are Black or non-binary women, trans actors, trans artists. A lot of times I think of Texas Isaiah, who is a photographer who I believe shot Janet Mock for the cover of Vogue, and was the first trans person in 2018, 17 to even shoot a person, and it had to be another trans person, right? And so we're kind of just getting to this Black trans man gets an opportunity because some other Black trans person gave him a shot, right? And it's like we need to, one, be giving other people a chance, right? When we see talent, we have to acknowledge talent. We need to be able to say, oh, this is my sister, this is my brother, this is my sibling, and really raise them up, because it's more than just the table, it's the room. Who's in the room? Like, we need people surrounding everybody than just that one person sitting at the table. So I love that you brought that up, Dominique, and that kind of gets to the point of like, you mentioned that we were going to talk a little bit about it, Dominique, and I love to dive in a little bit to this. It's just like, when we see people on the screen, and who we see on the screen kind of underscores who is worthy, right? Who is worthy to be seen, who is worthy to be acknowledged, and furthermore, who is worthy of love and respect and compassion. And something that I've kind of noticed in my time as a trans queer person is we are kind of facing an uphill battle, even in our own personal lives, to get people to see us as more than just, I don't know, a trope or a fetish or just like something that's unique or something that I can like take home and everyone will marvel at because it's just so different and exotic, right? And I would love to hear your thoughts on like what being seen and valued and loved as a trans person means to you, and how that's kind of worked in your lives and how that influences your own work being in the media. I'll pass to you, Connie.
I don't know what love looks like. I've been fetishized for my life. I've been sort of set as like something only to be like looked at and not to be embraced. And we have to sort of tear down the that mask of masculinity and femininity and what it means to you, and internalizing what your attraction to me means. It means love. That's all. Our eyes met, we fell in love, and we sailed off into the sunset. There's nothing evil or dishonest or wrong about that in any way. How is love being wrong? How is treating someone with respect and with caring, how is that wrong? We sort of have to get away from the feeling internally that this means that I am weird or sick myself if I am attracted. So, you know, we do have to see love in a way in media that is caring, that is supportive, and not the kind of what is reflected in society where you fetishize someone and you are like, you know, a sex worker or a villain that you have to kill, and that sort of, you know, a way for you to work out in your mind your feelings for someone, why is it acceptable for your feelings to come out as violence? And why does society applaud that? So I think once that question is sort of delved into and answered, we can then go ahead and explore love. But it should be done now. We can explore it on the way and then, like, become better people and not sort of be so fearful of introspection and what your feelings from someone means about you. It means that you love and care for someone. And it shouldn't go to another place of fear, and then fear equals violence.
Yeah, that was so well said. And I think that most trans people have that experience of I'm just being myself. I am just living my life. I go to Whole Foods or Trader Joe's just like you do. And I like most people am looking to be seen and seen for who I am fully, and me being myself is not a threat. And the type of damage that does to, I specifically think about trans youth, like, right, they're sitting around looking at the television screen and they're like, well, if I want to find love, then this is what's going to happen to me if I put myself out there just because I'm being myself. And I think there's also a lot of privilege that goes into that. I know specifically just for me, being able to walk around and pass is like just a completely different thing. And some people, trans men, trans women, don't want to pass, don't have the luxury of passing. And that's also something that tends to rub up against people for no reason. It doesn't make any sense at all. But Dominique, do you have anything that you like to say on this?
Yeah, in my experience, I'm kind of like the opposite. Like, I like to invade spaces, and as a normal person, as a model, as a Black woman, and I leave the trans for the end. So that way people get to know me as a person and see me, how I interact with everybody, how, no one knows I'm even trans. And once you don't go inside of something with that the center of the topic, the experience and the way that people treat you is a lot different. So I've learned in my experience, I have the capability of passing, and when I go to certain spaces, like I that I like the fact that people don't know that I'm trans and they don't treat me any differently. But then I'm also very open to say, like, hey, guess what? Like, you were just in the interactions you spent the whole day with a trans woman and you didn't even know, and you didn't feel fetishized, you didn't feel sexualized or anything. So I personally like to do those kind of like experiments, because I know I go to a lot of spaces where I'm like the only trans person in there. And then it's not like I announce it, but I'm also not, it's just not a secret. And if you ask someone or I talk about my work, I'll be like, hey, I'm a trans model, I do this, like, but I don't like to go into that, because I notice when you tell people that you're trans, then all of a sudden they think, like, they come out of left field and ask you like weird questions about your anatomy and like stuff like this. And I'm like, you wouldn't ask this girl that just walked in to hear that. So what makes you think that you have the audacity, or you have the nerve to ask me those kind of questions? What genitals I have? That should be something if you're going to be intimate with somebody. So I know like the fetishization part is like really bad. And luckily I've had like experience, because I went outside of America and I like found love, and I got treated as a human being, as a woman, and a partner. I wasn't fetishized. I wasn't like, over sexualized. So lucky I got to have that experience. So then when I came back here, I'm like, okay, this does exist. It's possible, it works. And now I won't settle for anything less. Because you get offers to have other things, and it's a really lonely city. Like, and the nights get really cold, especially now in the winter time, that you want to have some like body, but then it's not really worth it because you know that they don't appreciate you and they don't celebrate you. And it's not even, and I used to internalize it and think it was me the whole time, and I thought it was my issue, but then I found out it's not my issue because I'm in love with myself. I take the best care of myself. I'm a gift to anybody as a friendship or a relationship or business, etc. So I'm not the problem here. The other person is the problem. And they have a problem with themselves, that they can't accept the fact that they're interested in a woman, a beautiful trans woman like myself or Connie or a lot of us other women. That's their issue. And like Connie said, it's the toxic masculinity that we have to break down. And it's also the representation in media. You don't see like a trans woman as a bachelorette. You know what I mean? You don't see a trans woman in a competition with men trying to fall in love with her, when a lot of the trans women I know, they have serious relationships, they're married, they have guys taking them out on dates 7 days a week. We don't have that celebrated in the media. We don't have that representation anywhere. So we need to also fight to have that, because at the end of the day, we have to show people, which is what I love to do, is that trans people are normal people. We have emotions. We want to find love. Some of us are hopeless romantic. Some of us are polyamorous. Some of us are bisexual. We're all different things. But at the end of the day, we're flesh and blood and humans, and we have emotions, and we want to be treated as such. I don't want you to treat me as anything special because of my journey. Like, I already treat myself special because of my journey, and I think I'm blessed because of everything that I went through in my journey. So I just want you to treat me like a normal human being, just like you would treat someone's sister, someone's cousin, someone's aunt, someone's brother, someone's sister. Nothing different, just because I'm trans.
Man, I yeah, snaps to that. I'm like, well, I need to get some more of that Dominique, in my life. That awareness and that self-love that you have is really beautiful, and speaks to what all trans people can have when they look at themselves, right? And look at who they are, where they come from. I mean, not to sidetrack, but the history of trans folks in and outside of Western society is deep, it is rich, and it's outstandingly beautiful. I mean, trans people have been regarded as shamans, as oracles, as the people who are the bridge between these very things that are oftentimes misconstrued and overblown, the factors of masculinity and femininity. And the fact that trans people have kind of been relegated to this space of, like, I don't know, caricatures of masculinity and femininity, like we don't know what those things are, is quite sad. So I'm just so thankful, Dominique, that you were able to share a little bit of your journey of like how you were able to get to that place of not just self-love, but experiencing love. And I also wanted to point out that, yeah, America is a place where you leave this place and people care a lot less. You go to Italy, an Italian man sees a black woman, he's like, this is just a black woman.
Can you
like,
iron and can you cook spaghetti?
Yeah, so it is 100% like a different game out there, and kind of speaks to the work that we have specifically to do within this country. And America talks about being the leading voice in so many things, but on this field, we are way behind, years, decades, centuries behind other places who have regarded trans folks for who they are, which is beautiful and magical and just amazing. So thank you so much for sharing that with us, Dominique. And Connie, is there anything that any other experiences that you'd like to highlight? Specifically, what I like to say is these are the creative folks, the people who are on this call who have some of the power and agency, right, to represent us in the media. So in sharing your stories, is there any type of advice or really advice or touch points that you like to share? Because we are people and our experiences are rich. So how can we help those who aren't trans, right, go out and advocate for those people to have a seat at the table?
The trans community can bring such a rich perspective on life, and they can illustrate what is truly at the center of one's being and one's psyche, that is aside and away from the physical. The physical manifests itself and we do face it, but the internal does come out and blossom. And to explore that and to give that a seat at the table so that your life can be informed. There could be some product that you want to sell, but it's kind of hard and quirky. A trans person could give that sort of nuance and that sort of spice and kick right in the middle, right on top to push. So it is worth giving the trans community a seat at the table. It might not seem so in the beginning, but the breadth of experience and the breadth of journey can inform the human sort of journey, life, and perspective. That's what I.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that so much. I want to make sure that we have time for the roses to ask questions. So I guess the best way to do this, if you want to drop them in the chat, I can monitor that. Or if you want to turn on your video and come off mute and let Connie and Dominique know what questions you have for them, feel free to go ahead.
I just want to add, like, my advice is to the people in media is to just put trans people on a high pedestal, like higher than you would put anybody else, just so, like, you know, in normal fashion, they'll fall, but at least they won't be so low on the totem pole that, like, their lives are disregarded and we get murdered and, you know, we don't get representation at all. Like, if you know a trans person and you're a non-trans person, when you go into a room, speak very highly of that person and lead by example and educate other people around you that, you know, these people are human beings, they're talented individuals, they're hardworking, they have, you know, really good minds because, you know, we lived our life and went through so many journeys to get to where we are, that I think it should be celebrated and should be putting on a high pedestal and appreciated. And then, you know, eventually, you know, the girls that are, you know, up there will stay up there, and the girls that don't belong, you know, they will come down to like a normal thing, but then it won't be so, like, you know, aggressive and so, like, disregarded and so, like, disrespected.
Thank you for that, Dominique. Let's see, does anyone out there have a question?
I have a question. Oh, you can go first, whoever else was talking.
No, you got it.
Cool. My name's Noor. My pronouns are they, them. I work in tech and also am a creative writer, director, actor. I just do feel like I've been seeing some progress, but the progress happens to be incredibly centered on trans masculine, neurotypical, able-bodied, and heteronormative experiences. I just was wondering if we can think about or talk to how to complicate that representation. And I just think of the trans folks I know tick so few of those boxes. And I just wonder how we can like collectively be thinking about not just falling into the other typical traps of representation and like really try to push towards a more intersectional identity being presented.
Well, I think that will come with us being at the table and not wanting those representations. Our experience teaches us that it doesn't have to be hyper masculine, hyper feminine. It can be both, all of one. You know, it doesn't have to just be that sort of stranglehold on one thing. It can blossom into all things at once. So I think a seat at the table will give us more a more expansive view of all facets.
I love that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Was there another question before that one?
Okay, I'll ask a question since the questions are slowly coming through. My question, and once again, another stellar conversation. So thank the three of you. I thank the three of you very much for this, because I personally, I feel that I'm on a journey learning about this community, this very valued community, valuable community, but also are the members of our organization. So my question for the three of you is that how can cisgendered male and females show up more for our trans brothers and sisters?
It goes back to like what I said, like, you know, when you see someone speaking derogatory of a trans person or using incorrect pronouns, you know, step in politely and correct, you know, lead by example. And like I said, put trans people on a pedestal. Imagine us as unicorns, and we should be like protected. And when you describe us to other people, it should be as such. So it can be a contagious view of how to view trans people, and not like this over sexualized or like, oh, okay, yeah, only we can do certain kind of jobs. Like, I guess by leading by example would be the best way, because people like to act like they don't know how to treat a trans person like a normal person until they see someone else doing it. And then I guess they can automatically, they realize that it's okay to like treat a trans person normal. So I feel like that, you know, celebrating trans amorous men or women as well, you know, if you're into trans women and you like that, be open about that in front of other people, and don't be ashamed about it. You know, be proud and tell your friends like, hey, you know, it's okay to be attracted to trans people. Like, they're normal people. I know a few of them, you know, they're beautiful, they're hot, they're special. Like, just lead by example and educate people along the way, which I know it's like a lot of work, and like we have to do it a lot too, but it also helps us a lot as trans people. If you cisgender people who are educated and want to help, step a foot in and, you know, speak out for trans people. If you see someone that's saying, hey, you know, these trans people, blah, 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 like, hey, you know what? you have to correct yourself. You should educate yourself and do it in a manner that's not confrontational, of course, because ignorant people like confrontation, but try to avoid confrontation, but just educate and celebrate trans people for who they are and the journey that they've been through, and the struggles that they've went through, and the psychological battle and the dysphoria that we've dealt with.
Thank you for that, Dominique. I see you have a question, Michael.
Hi, yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I going back to what Dominique was saying about sort of putting trans people up on a pedestal, I just wanted to say that for me, myself, as a cisgendered male, my vision of the world was really sort of transformed by working on campaigns that dealt with the trans community. Earlier this year, I worked on a campaign with an organization called Destination Tomorrow up in the Bronx. And we actually researched nationally different organizations that are doing the work for trans individuals in different communities. And it was really eye-opening to see the sort of situation that people are in within different states, like with legal frameworks. But it also brought to light the work that people are doing, that the trans community is doing. Like a lot of it centered around young people and really trying to, work on their, the issues of mental health, as well as, really affirming their identity. And I just wanted to, again, putting those people up on the pedestal, people like Destination Tomorrow, if you're not aware of Sean Coleman, and I got to work with a filmmaker named Tourmaline, who is a trans woman who she was featured on Time 100, who's doing, a lot of work, like in terms of recognition for the community. But there's so many creative people out there, and so many people who are doing so much for the community, for young people in different parts of the country. And I think a lot of it, none of it gets much light to it. So yeah, I just wanted to do that, do my part there, and just sharing that, and I'm happy to share the name of some of those organizations to the team if we're looking to do any work there.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that, Michael. It's always good to hear instances of people who are able to step outside of their comfort zones and learn, right? It's just that simple. And just to the question of like, what can you do? It doesn't always have to be grandiose, right? It doesn't have to be, I just started a new job and my manager asked me the question, what can I do to best represent you to the team, right? It's not, I'm going to go blast it and become she was just like, what can I do? She put her pronouns in her LinkedIn, in her email bio, and on her Zoom chat, just to be an example to others, right? It doesn't always have to be, it's steps, right? You start somewhere and it doesn't always have to be from 0 to 100. So I think if you're thinking about what you can do, there are so many small changes that you can make today that would help trans folks. And it's just like sometimes a no-brainer to do them, and it doesn't take a lot of effort. So I see all of you some of you have your pronouns. It's so helpful. So I know what to say to you and so that other people can also be celebrated for who they are. So those are just some simple things. But it looks like we are out of time if no one else has any questions. I want to personally thank Dominique and Connie for educating me today. I have learned something. They have been fantastic, and their expertise is highly valuable to all of us, trans or cis or non-binary, all of it. So thank you to Connie and Dominique so much for taking the time out to be with us at late on the East Coast nights. It's 6 p.m. for me, so I'm chilling. But for all of you guys on the East Coast, thank you so much for being up with us late tonight. It was such a blast. I'm going to pass it back to Kenny to make sure to see if he has anything else to say.
Thank you, Noah.
Thank you, Noah, again, and thank you, Connie, and thank you, Dominique, once again. But I have to shout out to the team. So thank you, Kristen. Thank you, Carlos, and thank you, Lisa, on the killer design. We appreciate all of you for putting this together. This will probably be actually our last, we call these Sunnyside Chats this year, because the year is just kind of dwindling away. So this will probably be our last one before our end of the year meeting, in which the entire team will get together. But once again, I thank you all for your time, your talent, and your truth. And I wish everyone a good night and a early happy Thanksgiving if I don't talk to you before then. So everyone take care. God bless. Love y'all like cake.
Thank
To
you. Thank you
Louise.
for
Thank
having
you.
us. Thank you for
Happy
hosting this
holidays. Stay
space. Happy
safe.
holidays. Yeah.
Happy holidays.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.